What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy, that's Joe, and this is the Raceday Rundown. Joe, it's been a while since we've really been able to do a true Raceday Rundown. There's been a lot of crazy life stuff kind of happening behind the scenes. All good stuff, but definitely time-consuming for us. I feel like we're finally getting back on track, and I am so excited for Dover because what I've already seen so far from these cars, I think we're in for a great show. There's a lot of great plays that I want to get to. So for the complete list of the driver impact scores that we're going to talk about here in just a second, you're going to want to go to our Patreon. It's in our race guide. We got the full list there. Also in our Patreon, we have a complete, what we call our garage thoughts. It's our data spreadsheet. There's a lot of good stuff. I'm going to be referencing some newer things. The points per lap, we're going to talk about that some this episode. But man, I think we just need to kind of dive into it. We've seen some great racing, by the way, the last few weeks with the dirt. That was fun, exciting, a little gimmicky. Talladega put on a great show without many cautions. I think we're finally starting to see these teams kind of get dialed in. You want to kind of toss up the race preview here?
Yeah, let's unpack it a little bit because we've got a mile track. This is concrete. We're going to race a little bit different. I think it's going to be fun to watch how these cars really take to this because we haven't seen this type of racing before. And yeah, there's been a lot of different styles of racing that we've seen so far this year, and it's going to be something fun to watch it this week and see what we've learned. You talked about all the new information in the garage thoughts. We really have had a lot of time now to kind of put some stuff together, get a little bit more data. Doesn't mean we know what's going to happen because
it's NASCAR. You never do.
It could be a snore fest again. We could get cars that need the air, then they're not going to get it, and it could be boring. But before we do talk about how the strategy and everything gets laid out, we'll get through this race preview because 400-mile event, 400 laps, there's a lot of potential performance points available. So
absolutely,
280 of those are available this week. That's something that's really going to be key. Track position potentially, getting those points towards the front and leading laps and having fast laps. And then the stages break down at 120, 130, and then 150. So that will be pretty even. We'll see how the pit strategy and everything plays out at the end of this thing because Alex Bowman, last year's winner, see if he backs into another one or if he's even in the mix. It's going to be fun to watch. I'm excited to play how this plays out because, yeah, you mentioned life's been throwing at us 100 miles an hour here as of late. So I'm kind of trying to get settled into my new home. So I apologize for us not being able to do this every week here as of late. But I think this is a good time of the year to kind of get things dialed back in because there was a couple weeks that kind of were not gimmicky because it's NASCAR. They're trying new things.
It is gimmicky.
It is, but it's excitement, and that's what we're here for. And I think that these last couple weeks allowed for some real excitement at the end of the races that paid off, and NASCAR has seen some huge numbers out of it, and I'm excited to kind of get back into the driver's seat here and do this weekly and get to get on a roll here with the new information that you have in the garage thoughts. We'll get into that here in a minute, but just getting on a roll again.
Yeah, I think this is, it's a great track to test out some of the new stuff we've been kind of working on, seeing how it's going to play out. Obviously, it's NASCAR. You never know how that's going to really transpire. I mean, it could just one guy that you can kind of all in on could have a bad day. I mean, it happens. It's going to continue to happen. You just got to be lucky at times. I'm hoping and I do believe we will see a much better race than what we saw at Martinsville. Obviously, if you had Chase Elliott and Byron in your lineups for those two races, you probably had a good night. If you didn't, your night was terrible, and it was just a boring race overall. I think we're going to get more racing. We saw a lot of guys lose control in practice, guys getting loose in qualifying. So I think if guys, and we saw it also in the Xfinity race, if these guys can get some good runs, I think that they can play around with the air a little bit and make some passes. The biggest question will there be passing for the lead? But guys starting further back, I think that there is still that opportunity to move up. I don't think it's just going to be a one-groove racetrack the whole entire time. So I'm really excited for it. And, yeah, if you nail these dominators, these guys, if there's only two, maybe three, if they're in your lineups, it's going to be a good day.
So before we get into strategy, everybody out there, if you're watching, drop your DraftKings tag below. to get in on the action. We've got a weekly contest and a league. So if you want to get in and have some fun with us weekly, join us there. So drop your DraftKings tag below. We'll get you added. But talking strategy, Jeremy, how are you approaching it this week? I want to kind of figure out where you're at, what you're thinking, because this is a race where there are a lot of performance points available that we talked about earlier. It's going to be really paramount that you find the right guys to, I think, have some success this weekend.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a combo of a couple of these higher-priced guys. We have 3 drivers, all from Hendrick Motorsports, in the 11K range. So salary is going to be tight. Obviously, there's so many points up for grabs. They'll easily pay off their salaries if these are the guys that do well. I don't think it's going to be every few laps lead changing. I think there will be some long green flag runs. But I do think they'll be able to be passing at different times. But I think you're going to have these higher price guys, either a combo of Larson and Elliott. The real big kicker here is going to be William Byron. I don't want to go too much into it, but this is part of the strategy. He's a PD guy, but he's kind of a specialty PD guy, and we'll get into it when we talk about him. So I think you're going to have 2 dominators. You're going to have a few PD guys. I think the real thing is if you can nail these bottom guys, I think you're going to have potentially 2 drivers in the 5K range. And I'd like a couple of them to do potentially very well at this track. I think that might be what you have to do, almost a little stars and scrubs. Do you see something, potentially playing out differently, or are you going more mid-base? What are you thinking?
Oh, well, you could do a lot of different things. I think the pricing and then having qualifying play out the way it did, you could look like Chris Buescher was complete control of his race car in qualifying trim.
Right.
But if you wanted to get a little bit weird with it, you could stack him, and I'm not saying in any cash scenarios, but you could stack him with some of the guys up at the top, and it'd be make for a fun lineup. So there's a lot of different ways I think you can build lineups this week, and we can talk about some of these drivers as we get further along.
Yeah, I'm just excited for this race. I hope it's not a letdown, but I think what we're seeing from these cars for the most part has been pretty positive. We got that little stretch. Richmond wasn't the best, but hey, there was a lot of pit strategy. And I think that's going to be another thing that comes into play too, that you can't necessarily predict who's going to have the best pit stops and then who's going to have the one that costs them. But I think that could really be what this comes down to, whether it's a late caution pit stop or green flag pit stops at that last pit cycle.
Let me throw this at you. Talk about Chris Buescher starting first. Denny Hamlin talking about bad luck. Starting second. He's had a lot of bad luck. Is he the guy out of those 2, talking strategy here, which one would you lean heavier on in a tournament play? Buescher starting first that has a lower price tag, or Hamlin starting second that has some upside but can shoot himself in the foot and maybe have some issues on pit road, or they play strategy and he ends up in victory lane again?
Yeah, if I'm playing just tournament here, I'm going to play Chris Buescher over Denny Hamlin, but I don't like actually either play. Hamlin obviously has the opportunity to potentially dominate this race. It's certainly within the realm of possibilities with his just career history. However, he's been so inconsistent, and besides that win that was all pit strategy for him, he's had a terrible season so far. Doesn't mean he can't have a good race. Doesn't mean it can't be this week. But I would rather save the price, the salary, so I can play William Byron as a nice PD guy and hope that Chris Buescher leads at least half of the first stage and then finishes top 5, top 10. That's going to be a really good, solid play, and could pay out in those tournaments. But any sort of cash situations, I'm not that brave to play either one of those, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. So
I just think that Hendrick's is going to have too much long run speed, and then also the Fords. I just don't know if we're really going to see that domination from the Toyotas that are playable. There's a couple guys that I do like who drive Toyotas, but when you're talking about these higher priced guys, it is tough.
It's gonna be fun to watch, but I think you're right. And the guy that is at the top of the salary board, Kyle Larson, He's a checkered flag in our race guide this week, I think, for a good reason. He's had a lot of success here recently. He's 11,800, starting in that third position. He's got some really good potential to lead a lot of laps, get some fastest laps if he's able to get that early lead, or at some point throughout the race, we know he can lead laps. He hasn't led as many this year as we were used to seeing him lead last year, but I think he's still a great play.
Yeah, Larson's kind of had a interesting season as well. I mean, he got that win early, so we're like, oh, same old Larson, but he does not have the performance that we've been seeing from, and this is kind of more from the DraftKings perspective, because he's obviously had some nice finishes too. I think he has like 4 top 5s, so he's gotten some decent results. But from a DraftKings or Price Picks perspective, he's not getting a lot of fastest laps in these laps led like we saw last year, like his teammate William Byron. Chase Elliott's been running really well. I mean, he's a points leader. Larson's been in a weird spot, so it's hard to trust him this year, kind of what we've seen, but I think you kind of have to here if you're playing multiple lineups. I think he'll be a little chalky just because, like you said, I mean, he's got 4 top 10s out of the last 5 races here for himself. I mean, he's probably going to finish well. He's likely going to be running top 5 most of the day, maybe even first collecting some of those performance points. But to really feel comfortable trusting him, I think there's got to be some caution there. But overall, I mean, it's Larson, and you just know what he is capable of. His team hits it. Starting third, there's a lot of laps led and fastest laps up for grabs. So for me, I'm going to be at a 9.5 on Larson for my impact score, because you just got to do it.
Yeah, I landed at a 9 with them, and I'm at a 9 with his teammate Chase Elliott. He's starting right behind him in 4th position, but I think it's going to be weird to see where he pans out. I think there's a little bit more value with him potentially over on Prize Picks. You mentioned Prize Picks this week is going to be one of those fun situations to get some action in on, because you have less risk with only having to roster 2 or 3 drivers. However you want to stack your over-under combination over there, I think that allows for you to do some fun things, and it opens a lot of different doors. And I think Chase Elliott is in an interesting position this week, starting up there at 4th position. He doesn't have a lot of success here. He does have some. It's not always, it's hit or miss. And I think this year we have seen him be really consistent, I think. But, man, I just really think the under is where you could have some success this week, because I've seen that hit quite a bit this year with him on some situations where they have him priced a little bit high.
Right. It might not be him dominating. He just might run top 5 most of the day. I mean, because the last 7 races here, he does have 4 top 5s. So he's had some good races. The problem is his average DK points over those 7 races is 40 points. Obviously, that's going to fluctuate quite a bit race to race. But just the average, I mean, 40 points for a guy who's over 11,000, that's definitely not going to cut it. I will find ways to get Elliott in, because he has, I think it's the best average finish this year out of anybody. He is the points leader. He's got a nice little cushion. I think it's like 20 points, something like that, over his buddy Ryan Blaney. So he's had a good year. It's just a DK perspective,
not getting the potential or all the performance points that you need,
except for Martinsville.
And that's why he's perfect, I think, for this situation this week on Prize Picks. That's why I think there's some value there, and that's why I go the under there.
Right. So I think under is definitely a solid option there. Also watch for it, because you may see a lot of people kind of between releasing and closer to the race, a lot of people may be hammering the over. You might even be able to get it at a better rate. Just pay attention to it. But if you like this number right now, definitely hit the under quickly. But overall, I think he is playable, but I completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, it's just the inconsistency, tournament play only. But I'm going to be looking at other dominators that I like and trying to build off of that one, because I think this guy's going to be the next guy on the list, William Byron, 11,000. Lap 1, first Group 1. I don't even think they completed a full lap. Just lost control of it, it looked like, and he smacked the crap out of that wall, and they had to go to a backup car. So no qualifying effort for William Byron. Now he's starting 33rd. Going into this weekend, he was going to be one of the guys that I was going to be pretty high on almost no matter what. Because I just think where he's running, I mean, when we start looking at our points per lap, over these last few weeks, he's jumped up there, and he's number one in 2 different categories. Overall, so all DraftKings points, PD, all that included, based on his laps that he's completed, he's ranks number 1 in that category. You remove PD, we've seen quite a bit of fluctuation between that. He's still number 1. So that means he is getting fastest laps, he is getting laps led, and he's getting good finishes, which is where you obviously get a good bulk of your points too. So I'm all in on William Byron, but now the fact that he's starting 33rd, God, it's like I almost think you either, if you really are questioning it, just don't play him at all, because you'll have an advantage if he has a bad day, because he's going to be over 50% owned in pretty much every tournament, I would think. That being said, he doesn't have to do much to break the slate. So he's a 10 for me.
So if you want to check out why Jeremy gave him a 10 and all the information he just checked out, go look at our garage thoughts. Jeremy put that together, worked on that really hard this week. I think I'm in agreement with you because I'm laid at a 9.5 with them. I think the only reason it's not a 10 is because of the ownership. I think he's going to have massive ownership, so he can be somebody you can fade in tournaments and just be contrarian. So that's where I would lie with him.
And just real quickly, like, we don't know how these cars are going to be passing track position. That might really be what it is. It might be really hard for him to move up. If that, backup car is not dialed in, starting that far back, he's at risk of going laps down early. That can completely shift the day. So that's not like an easy thing here. But if it does play out a little bit like the Xfinity race that we saw, here, we saw guys had to go from the back. Ryan Sieg started in the back. He finished, I believe, 10th. Sam Mayer won the first stage and then had a tire fall off and had to come back to pit road, and he had to start the rear of the field, and he ended up finishing 5th, I believe. So the only reason I'm bringing that up, those guys were able to move through the field. If that's the case for Byron, it really is a green light. But there is some concern, because what if they don't have that car dialed in the way it needs to be?
Yeah, and it's a different car, so we're going to see what really we have, because I think we've seen some of these races become snore fests whenever you can't get the air you need, and we'll find out how it actually ultimately plays out, because I think Joey Logano, you talk about somebody that's got some passing to do. He's starting 22nd. He's 10,600 at DraftKings this week. I've got a 9 with him because I think he has a lot of potential. He's been fairly successful here, but the Fords didn't look all that great outside of Buscher, and Blaney was okay, yeah. But he didn't look like he was all dialed in at all to get his initial qualifying run. So I think they have some ability to get more out of that race car. I think that he has some potential there. That's why I'm at a 9.
Yeah, I'm going to be at a 9.5. I think it's a solid play. I think he can move up. I don't like his upside as high as Byron going into it right now, just because he's only $400 cheaper, but 11 place differential spots, less potential there. And like you said, Ford's outside of those 2 guys didn't look all that impressive. But the reason why I'm going to give Logano a 9.5 is because this is the guy that you can go to if you like some of these other guys down low, or maybe like a Ross Chastain actually being the main dominator, or even a Chris Busch, or maybe you want to do that. Well, to get off the ownership of Byron, hit up Logano. I can't give him a 10 because he doesn't have the upside like Byron does. But I like Logano quite a bit. I think his teammate, Ryan Blaney, next on the salary board, 10,300, starts 5th. I'd say all in all looked pretty good from what I saw in practice and qualifying. I'm at 8.5. I'm a little bit less than you, just because it's like it's not necessarily the greatest track for Blaney, but we've already seen with these new cars, the prior track history doesn't seem to influence it as much as what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's why I landed a 9 with him, too. He's somebody that has been consistent this year, like a Chase Elliott. You'll have some upside potential, but I just think him and even the next guy, Alex Bowman.
Well, real quick before you get up, Blaney does rank number 2 in the points per lap in the just what he's getting you, not when you factor in PD. He drops back to 3rd, but he's still top 3 in both categories. So there is still reason. I mean, Blaney has been really fast this year. If they do nail that setup, that's all the reason to kind of support what you just said. So I just wanted to kind of say, no, there is performance to support him having a great day.
For 2022, his performance has been there consistently, and that's why I think he's got a little bit leg up on the next guy, Alex Bowman, who is $10,100 starting 6th. He's one position behind, but he has a win here. He's been solid. I think he's in my position, or with my impact score, I've given him a 9. I think him and Blaney have very similar upside. I think they both can be dominators if everything plays out. I want to have both sprinkled throughout, but I don't want to go heavy in either direction.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm going to be at a 9 as well, and I think I'm giving him a little bit higher rank than Blaney just because of the Hendrick power that we've seen. I mean, obviously he's right there starting behind Blaney. Blaney seems to have had better performance throughout the year, but man, it's just Hendrick is just really good here at Dover. I mean, they're all. I'm sure William Byron would have started up there too if he didn't wreck. It's a tough. Bowman is right now in that spot where everyone's probably going to be sleeping on him, and then that's when he pulls out another one of these backdoor wins. So I'm not saying he will win, but it's like we're right in that zone where everyone starts to kind of forget about Alex Bowman. Oh, whatever, and then he shocks everybody.
Martin Truex, 9,800, starting 18th. This is somebody that's going to be talked about a lot. I think he has a lot of upside. I've got him at a 9. I just don't know how much exposure I want with him. It's because I've seen a couple different versions of Martin Truex this year, I think, but this is an interesting spot. What do you think with him?
Well, based on practice and qualifying, I didn't love much of anything out of the 19. But the fact that now he is starting 18th, there's some PD upside, and there's obviously Dominator upside based on track history. But Joe Gibbs still, even though Denny Hamlin, we're going to talk about next, started second or qualified second, it still seems like Joe Gibbs is just a tick behind. I think if you want to just get off of some of the chalk, these guys are decent options to go to, but there's not a lot of, I want to play Truex. It's like, maybe I'll see if I can fit him in because there's just too inconsistent for me to feel comfortable playing him or Denny Hamlin. But yeah, Truex, I'm at a 9.
Yeah, I think I landed at a 9 with him because of him and Logano in my eyes are very similar plays, so you can interchange them and have that place differential mix up. So I think they both fall in that same realm.
Right. Hamlin, we've talked about him a few times already. 9,500 starting second. Yeah, outside that win, this has been a very terrible, terrible season for Hamlin. The points that he's getting you, let me find his name real quick. He's way down there. The points that he's getting you, he ranks 20th overall. When you factor in PD and all of that, he ranks 33rd. Has not been good to roster Denny Hamlin, maybe outside of that one win that he had at Richmond. It's just been tough. The performance is not there. I mean, his PD for the year is minus 80. I mean, that can happen when you start up front and have a couple bad days, but geez, man, it seems to be almost weak. I mean, he's only completed 82, just a tick over 82% of the laps so far this year. You got guys like Elliott, Bowman, Amarola, Brad, Eric Jones, Justin Haley, Michael McDowell. They're all at 99% lap completions. And he's barely over 82. It's been a rough year for that 11 crew.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be difficult for it to get much worse. So I'm at an 8 with him in a DraftKings scenario. I think he has great upside in a GPP tournament play as a tournament play. I think the real value lies with him this week as the under, though, over on Prize Picks. And I say that because they've got him at 43.5 points. He hasn't averaged very many points through this year, but even starting second, it's going to be hard for him to get some points if he struggles at all. It's going to be hard for him to stack up any real points, and if he gets a finish in the 20s like we've seen consistently, it's going to be difficult for him to do anything. So hitting that under might be the wise option there, and that's why I'm going.
Well, yeah, the biggest risk, in my opinion, to that is obviously him just nailing the setup, but I don't think that's going to happen. There's just too much that's going to play out. But if he is faster than Chris Buescher at the start and he leads half or most of that first stage and then drifts back but still maintains, a 6th, 7th place finish, then of course he's going to hit that over. But I don't love his odds right now based on who's starting behind him, and probably he's going to be in a groove that's not going to get the best of launches. And yeah, when you got Hendrick guys breathing down your neck, I just don't like the position that Hamlin's in. There's no comfort there, but there is some potential because he will likely be pretty low owned, I would think, at least.
Yep, I think that's why I hit the under on that's where I see the value this week. Prize Picks, if you want a promo code, use the promo code GARAGE. It will get you a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. So go ahead and take full advantage of that.
Free money.
Absolutely. So Kevin Harvick, 9,300, starting 11th, Jeremy. I've given him a 9. I think he is, if you look at our race guide, the track facts say it all. This guy has been dominant here. Absolutely dominant over the last few races. But it's a new car. It's a completely new setup. I think this potentially, though, could be a week where if we see Ford step up, can it come from Kevin Harvick? We've seen Ryan Blaney be really consistent. Kevin Harvick's not been horrible. So I think this might be a testing grounds and a proving ground for them to take that next step this year. It'll be fun to see if it plays out that way, but I'm confident with my 9 on him this week.
Yeah, even though I only gave him a 9, I think Harvick is one of my favorite plays on the slate. I think he looks right now, based on our projections, which I think are a little soft. I think he can definitely exceed this, but a lot of racing that can happen. I think he looks like a great over at Prize Picks as well. I mean, based on our projection and their projection, we got a cushion of over 15 points to the good for that over. So I really like Harvick here. You mentioned, his stats out of this world. He has a driver rating over the last 7 of 126, 2 wins, 5 top 5s, 7, 100% on top 10s. The only real concern is Stewart Haas in practice and in qualifying didn't look that great. Even Harvick, who just barely missed out on making that second round of qualifying, he's starting 11th, best that he could do, but some of his teammates, the performance is not there, so that's a little concerning, but I think they'll figure this out. This seems like the week where Harvick reminds everyone, hey, still pretty good. We're still pretty good over here at the 4 camp. Don't forget about us. So I think he's in a nice spot. 9 for me.
Well, let's get on to Kyle Busch. He's 9,100, starting 10th. I think he's in a very similar situation to Kevin Harvick. He's been fairly consistent. Had a couple ups and downs this year. Had a win on the dirt.
Backed into that win.
All right, I'll let you finish that one off. But he is somebody I think that where he's at, he's got some upside with place differential where he's priced. He's priced fairly well, but a 9's where I land. I think he's going to be somebody that you can feel comfortable with, just like Kevin Harvick. They know how to get around here. They most likely will stay out of an accident, like getting on pit road. They should have been able to have done that enough to be able to be confident in it. But you've seen enough people this weekend already.
It's funny that you bring that up because they were talking about that. It was either during practice or I think it was during the practice session that Dover is the hardest pit road to get on to on the circuit, or at least the current circuit. I said it's very, very tough. It's a very, very slow speed limit. Doesn't look good for Hamlin in that regard because he loves to speed on pit road, and some of these other guys too. Kyle Busch at times, but we know that he is, for the most part, pretty rock solid on those. I'm going to be at an 8.5 on Kyle Busch. There's definitely potential there. I don't know if or how much I'll end up with him. But I wouldn't fault you for playing him because obviously there's plenty of talent. He's looked good this year. Again, it's that Toyota thing. If they if they figure it out, they should all run good. But they have been a little off some of these races, similar to this style of track.
You're correct about that, and I think some guys that are going to be in a tight spot. Tyler Reddick already, man. He did not look good throughout the whole setup today. $8,800, starting 26. He's been one of those guys that's been fast throughout the year, though. I've given him a 9. I think he's got some potential place differential upside. He can be in a position to potentially get some fastest laps if they can tweak this car a little bit, but it could be concerning because his RCR teammate wasn't dialed in as well either.
Yeah, he just looked off all practice. Qualifying, not good. Teammate, like you said, not good. There's really nothing that says that you should play Reddick other than the fact that he's been one of the best cars this year. I mean, he is getting performance. He ranks, as far as points that he's getting you, he ranks 7th out of everybody so far this year. PD has been a little bit of an issue, minus 68 for the year. Not as big of a concern now, starting further back, but less than 90% of the laps completed, so that is a little concerning as well. I think a lot of those came last week from the Talladega issues that they had. They need another good run because they're right outside the playoffs right now, so they need a good points day. I don't know how aggressive they'll be. I was excited because I thought that this would be a place that we'd see Reddick do really well at, but they struggled. So I'm at an 8. I thought I would end up higher, but it's tough for me to feel confidence based on what I've seen from other drivers and from that team.
What do you think about Ross Chastain? He's starting 7th, 8,600. Last week's winner. He's been able to win twice now. I've got a 9 because he's been consistent. Like, he's been able to do what a lot of other guys have not been able to do, and that's been consistent. And that's something we hadn't been able to say about Ross Chastain in years past because he was in accidents or just got in somebody else's
slow cars.
Yeah,
too.
And he was in back marker cars for a lot of it. So there was never an opportunity to really understand how much talent the dude had. You knew he had it, but how much did he have? And he's proving it this year. Oh, my God.
And with a young team, too.
It's amazing to see what they're doing, and the parity that we've talked about for this sport has really come full circle. We've seen this. So this what we talked about last year and the year before, here it is. It's fully in front of us, and at $8,600, I'm going to play him until you see something else happen over and over and over again, because all I've seen over and over and over again is him win.
Yeah, or just run really well. Maybe he didn't always win, but he ranks 4th overall in points that he's getting you compared to everybody else. He's plus 62 on PD. He's had a couple bad issues. He really screwed me in the dirt race because I was high on him, and he was doing really well, but I guess the motor ate some dirt or something and literally killed the motor. So that affected his laps completed percentage. So that is a little bit skewed, but when he's on the track, he is getting you points. He actually ranks 2nd as far as overall points per lap when you just factor in the PD. So solid play. Like you said, as long as you're getting decent pricing and decent starting spot, I think he could be one of those guys who finds his way up towards the front and gets you some laps led. A lot to like about Chastain. I'm at a 9.
Yeah, and I think everybody we really just talked about are probably a lot of the key building blocks, and so that leaves us with some guys below that we're going to talk about. But if you want to check out our full list of DK impact scores, go check out our race guide. The link's below. You can check it out, see everything there. The garage slots that you've put together really allows us to have that spreadsheet that goes along with the data to support everything that we're talking about here. But Brad Keselowski, 7,700, starting 20th, is somebody who his teammate has the pole. We've talked about Chris Buescher. He's part owner of this team. Is he going to be able to mirror the setup, or are they going to be able to have the same control that it looked like Buescher had throughout the entirety of today?
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure. You would figure that those would kind of be a little bit reversed, that Brad would be the guy who got the pole and Chris Buescher would be back there. So not quite sure what's going on there, but Brad is averaging just a little bit better than 11th place finish over the last 7 races here. The only thing that's concerning is there's no top 5s in there. 3 top 10s. 6 top 15s. So he does run pretty well. He is getting you a little bit of performance points, getting you good DK points, not really hurting you too much there. So I think he's a solid play overall. It is kind of tough. Like, what do we really get? But, 7,700 starting 20th, I think he's, close to a top 10. If he gets close to a top 10 at that price tag, I mean, you're looking at it easily over 5X. And then if they really get it dialed in like his teammate, there's even some performance points really up there for grabs. So I think Brad is a solid play here. I'm going to be at an 8.5 on him. Not sure how popular he'll be, but I think he's a solid play overall.
Yeah, I landed at 8.5 with him, and I'm at an 8.5 with the next guy too. Kurt Busch, 7,500, starting 16th. I think that he's got a very similar path to value as Brad Keselowski. I think these two guys can be difference makers in this lineup because after these guys, there's almost a little bit of a no man's land in my opinion. There's guys that are playable, but really to find the value and to get the building blocks that we talked about above, these guys might be in that nice middle tier range because it's going to be difficult to want to play some of the guys below them.
Yeah, I actually really like Kurt Busch this week. He's another one of those guys that I was kind of similar to Byron. I just kind of had a good feeling about him. He's been sneaky this year. I mean, he's got 2 top 5s already out of that 45 car that Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin own. So he is getting some good finishes. He's got 4 top 10s, but his average finish is, basically 17th. So there's been some inconsistencies there. But, man, it's like when he's on, it's almost like it doesn't really matter what car you give Kurt Busch. If you give him just enough, he's going to find a way to make the top 10. And kind of given where he's at right now, 7,500, 16th, it's not an obvious play me. It's the easy kind of spot to say, he's 7,500, he's only 16th. What if he only finishes 13th or something like that? That's not a lot of points. But I think he can do much better than that. So I think this is a little bit lower ownership play with some pretty high upside, in my opinion. I'm going to be at 8.5 right there with you.
All right, so we've got some guys down in the $5,000 tier that we really like. Actually, there's 3 of them that I've ranked higher than an 8. So that's good news because we wanted to build some guys or some lineups with the building blocks that are a little bit more pricey this week. So check that out. But we'll talk about Harrison Burton to wrap this up. $5,000 starting 35th. Didn't have the greatest day to get things started, but he is somebody that is in a solid position for value. If he can stay on the lead lap, doesn't get into some issues being a rookie, it's a difficult place to navigate, but I'm at an 8.5. I think there's a way he can get some solid points and not have to do all that much.
Yeah, it's hard to really find a lot of positive data to really use to support playing Harrison Burton, but he had such a terrible
$5,000.
He had such a terrible start to the season that his numbers just immediately were in the trash. But when you start to break out and look at what he's kind of done over the last few weeks, it's not impressive where you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to be the next Ross Chastain. No, we're not saying that. But when you're 5,000, you're starting 35th, you're in a slightly less than Penske car, and you're getting around a 25th, 23rd place finish kind of over the last few races, if you hit that again, that's massive value for us, both for the points based on his salary and then what it allows you to do with some of these other guys who are likely to be heavy hitters like the Loganos or Blaneys or Elliott's or Larson, whoever you think the dominator is, that opens the door. So Harrison Burton is another one of these plays where I'm probably just going to go all in and just kind of hope for the best. Downside, you miss the setup, you go laps down early, can really screw up your day, but there's 400 laps. There's lots of opportunities to improve your position on the track throughout the race. So I think Harrison Burton, it'll be interesting to see. A lot of people don't want to play him. He was in some pretty decent spots over the last few weeks and fairly low ownership, so it'd be interesting to see what people do with him this week. I would think it's going to be fairly high, but you never know.
Yeah, and if you don't want to play Harrison Burton, there's plenty of other value out there this week. We mentioned where everybody is in our impact score, so go check it out. Anything else you want to wrap up before we get out of here, Jeremy?
Man, I don't have anything in particular, man, other than just I'm really excited for this race. I'm right there with you. I hope it's not a snooze fest. I don't think it will be, but you never know. It is still a new car. They're still figuring things out. I think, there was some factors going against that Martinsville race. The type of tire they use, the temperature. It won't be as cold at Dover this weekend when they're racing. I don't know if they've changed the tire, but I would imagine if that was a big culprit, they're going to be figuring some of this stuff out. So there may be a few snooze fest races the rest of the year, but most of them have been pretty exciting. So all in all, I'm just really excited to see what happens this week and to see if some of the stuff now that we have some solid season data, what can we use to really help us in DraftKings or Price Picks or straight up bets or whatever your cup of tea is. Now we should have some information to support our decisions.
Absolutely, and I'm exactly on board with that because I'm ready to get this thing a little bit more consistent now that we're getting settled in from everything, but I'm excited to see the action on the track. Concrete Monster Mile, it's always interesting to see how these things end up, and I think strategy is going to be key. So I'm ready to watch and see who benefits the most from that.
Right, and we're just getting into a good chunk of just good tracks. I mean, next week, Darlington. Throwback week, man. I mean, I don't know how the racing is going to be, but it's just a fun event just to watch, see all the new paint schemes and stuff like that. It's going to be, we're just at a good spot this year where, NASCAR is getting into the summer. Sometimes it's a little dry, but they got a good group of tracks coming up that should make for some entertaining racing.
All right, who do you have winning Dover?
I hadn't even really thought about the winner. Dude. You know what? Let's just roll the dice. I'm going to go Kevin Harvick.
Really? Okay. I'm actually going Larson. I think this is just something that
take the easy one.
We see him get back in winner circle, but I've been wrong before. It's going to be fun to see how it plays out. But we'll see ultimately who Miles the Monster's holding at the end of the day because it will be fun and exciting regardless. But for the DK Garage, I'm Joe, and that's Jeremy, and we'll see you next time.